enter this other dimension of reality and to continue life, although it's not life as we would interpret it.
Mummification was a common practice in Egyptian times. But what about the much more extreme living mummification process performed by Japanese Buddhist monks?
They would willingly embark on a process of self-mortification, which was tantamount to suicide.
Throughout history, humans have founded countless religions, each unique with its own customs and traditions. Even with an open, tolerant mind, however, some of these rituals can seem grotesque or leave you questioning the boundaries of human belief and sanity. Number 12. Self-mummification of Sokushinbutsu. In the shadowed corridors of Japan's historical religious practices, there lurks a haunting and extraordinary ritual known as Sokushinbutsu, or self-mummification. This ancient practice, which spanned from the 11th to the 19th centuries, involved Buddhist monks voluntarily embarking on a harrowing decade-long journey to achieve immortality and attain the revered status of a living Buddha. Imagine a solitary monk, isolated in a small, austere chamber. An unyielding regimen of extreme self-discipline and ritual consumes his days. This is no ordinary path to enlightenment. Sokushinbutsu begins with a grueling process of starvation and fasting designed to eliminate body fat and fluids. This self-imposed deprivation purges the body of impurities and halts the decay process post-mortem. But the ordeal does not end with mere fasting.
What starvation actually does, however, is start to preserve his body while he's still alive.
The monk's quest reaches its most chilling climax as he prepares for burial. After years of rigorous ascetic practices, the monk, now significantly weakened, is buried alive in a specially designed tomb. This tomb is often a small, narrow space, with just enough room to sit in a meditative posture. Equipped with minimal provisions, the monk's final act is to enter deep meditation, awaiting death. What drives a person to undergo such a ghastly procedure? For the monks of Sokushinbutsu, it was the ultimate act of spiritual dedication. By transcending physical existence and bodily decay, they believed they could achieve Buddhahood in their lifetime. The grueling practice of self-mummification was seen as a way to embody divine purity and achieve eternal enlightenment. The gruesome result of this practice can still be witnessed today. Mummified remains of Sokushinbutsu monks have been discovered. Their bodies preserved remarkably well due to the extreme conditions of their burial. One such notable figure is Sangha Tenzin, a monk whose 550-year-old mummified body was rediscovered in a collapsed stupa in a northern Himalayan region in 1975. His preservation is attributed to the arid and cold climate of the region. The Sokushinbutsu ritual was inspired by ascetic traditions such as Shugendo and Shingon Buddhism, and while similar practices were observed in other regions of Asia, Japan's method of self-mummification stands out for its sheer extremity and the profound spiritual resolve it required. Number 11. Fornication rituals of the Babylonians. Imagine stepping into ancient Babylon around the 6th century BCE, where the air is thick with incense, and the grand temple of Ishtar looms with an almost supernatural aura. This temple wasn't just a place of worship. It was the heart of one of the most startling and controversial religious practices of the ancient world, the fornication rituals of the Babylonians. According to the Greek historian Herodotus, Babylonian religious customs mandated that every woman must, at least once in her lifetime, sit in the temple of Ishtar and engage in sexual intercourse with a stranger. This ritual was not just a bizarre practice, but was deeply intertwined with the sacred nature of sex in Babylonian spirituality. It was considered an act of divine connection and fertility, believed to be a sacred act that honored the goddess of love and war, Ishtar. Women in their finest attire, adorned with cords and accompanied by a retinue, were seated in the sacred precincts of the temple, engaged in a profound religious duty rather than leisure. Men from all walks of life would pass through designated pathways, casting money into the laps of these women. This money was not just a transaction, but was believed to be imbued with sacred power, and the women, following the divine mandate, could not refuse any suitor. This act was a crucial component of the ritual. The money given had to be accompanied by the invocation, "I invite you in the name of my Lita," a reference to another divine figure associated with fertility. The ceremony itself was a unique blend of sacred and profane, a religious rite that mingled with the personal lives of the participants. Women who were deemed beautiful and desirable could complete their ritual quickly, often within a few days. However, those less fortunate might spend years waiting for their turn, their plight reflecting the harsh judgments of society. This practice, though shocking by modern standards, was a manifestation of how sex was intertwined with the divine in Babylonian culture. It highlighted the ancient belief that sexual acts were not just physical experiences, but profound religious ceremonies that connected the earthly to the divine. Number 10. Aztec human sacrifice. In the heart of the 15th and 16th centuries, the Aztec Empire stood as a formidable and puzzling civilization, its towering temples and intricate rituals echoing through the annals of history. One of the most horrifying and captivating aspects of their culture was their practice of human sacrifice, a ritual so graphic it left Spanish conquistadors in stunned horror. When Spanish conquistador Hernán Cortés and his men arrived in the Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan in 1521, they were greeted by a scene of unimaginable brutality. The Templo Mayor, the grand temple at the center of the city, was the stage for these shocking ceremonies. Aztec priests, wielding razor-sharp obsidian blades, would cut open the chests of their sacrificial victims, offering their still-beating hearts to the gods. The lifeless bodies were then hurled down the steps of the Templo Mayor, a chilling testament to the empire's religious fervor. Andrés de Tapia, one of the conquistadors, vividly described the two massive towers flanking the Templo Mayor, each constructed entirely of human skulls. Between them stood a towering wooden rack, displaying thousands of additional skulls, their bored holes allowing them to be slid onto wooden poles. This macabre display was intended to showcase the empire's power and instill fear in its enemies. For centuries, many historians dismissed these accounts as exaggerated propaganda aimed at justifying the Spanish conquest and the destruction of Tenochtitlan. However, archaeological discoveries in 2015 and 2018 have unearthed startling evidence corroborating the conquistadors' grisly descriptions. The very skull towers and racks detailed in the Spanish reports were uncovered at the Templo Mayor excavation site, proving that these horrifying practices were indeed real. Though it's true that the Spanish likely inflated their figures, Fray Diego de Duran claimed that 80,400 people were sacrificed for the Templo Mayor's inauguration. The physical evidence supports the grisly reality described. The Aztecs' practice of human sacrifice was deeply rooted in their cosmology. According to their beliefs, the sun god Huitzilopochtli was in a constant struggle against darkness. To ensure the sun's continued journey across the sky and to stave off the end of the world, the Aztecs felt compelled to feed Huitzilopochtli with human hearts and blood. Moreover, the practice served a strategic purpose in the expanding Aztec Empire. The ritualistic killing of war captives and the large-scale display of skulls were stark reminders of the empire's dominance and power. DNA tests from the Templo Mayor site revealed that most of those sacrificed were outsiders, likely enemy soldiers or slaves, reinforcing the dual purpose of intimidation and religious devotion in Aztec society. Number 9. Burying Pharaoh's servants with him. In the early dynastic period of ancient Egypt, around 3000 to 2686 BCE, the pharaohs were not merely seen as rulers, they were revered as divine beings on earth.
So let it be done.
This belief bestowed upon them a celestial status, where their journey after death was anticipated to continue in the paradisiacal field of reeds. However, this heavenly continuation of royal life came with a terrifying and grim practice: retainer sacrifice. The Egyptians, deeply committed to ensuring that their pharaohs enjoyed the same luxuries in the afterlife as they did in the mortal realm, devised a horrifying method to guarantee this by burying the pharaoh's servants and courtiers alive with him. Known as retainer sacrifice, this practice involved taking the lives of the pharaoh's closest aides, guards, servants, concubines, and sometimes even relatives. This was done to provide the deceased ruler with a familiar entourage to serve him beyond the grave. One of the most startling examples of this tradition can be found at the royal cemetery of Abydos, where the tombs of the First Dynasty kings, from Aha to Kwa'a, are accompanied by numerous subsidiary burials. These burials were meticulously arranged, reflecting the hierarchical structure and relationships of their occupants to the king during their lives. For instance, the tomb of King Kwa'a was found with an elaborate stela belonging to a man named Sebef, who was a priest and a confidant of the king. Sebef's final resting place, just outside the king's tomb, was proof of his closeness to the pharaoh, but at the cost of his life. The archaeological findings are both chilling and fascinating. The subsidiary graves often contained skeletal remains of individuals who were no older than 25 years. This youthfulness suggests they were chosen specifically for this sacrificial rite, highlighting the ruthless selection process. Despite the destruction and theft that have plagued these ancient tombs, the remnants being uncovered today offer a haunting glimpse into this brutal practice. Retainer sacrifices, though rare, underscore the lengths to which ancient Egyptians would go to uphold their beliefs and the power dynamics of their society. Number 8. Scalpsi castration practice. The Scalpsi, a radical Christian sect that emerged in the Russian Empire, practiced one of the most horrifying and extreme religious rites known to history: castration and genital mutilation. Their founder, Kondraty Ivanovich Selivanov, preached that true spiritual purity could only be achieved through the eradication of sexual desire, a goal they pursued with gruesome dedication. The origins of the Scalpsi movement trace back to the late 19th century, when Selivanov, a runaway peasant and former adherent of the flagellant Kleisti sect, established his own group in the village of Sosnovka near Morshansk. Styling himself as the Son of God and Redeemer, Selivanov attracted followers by advocating for extreme self-mutilation as a means to spiritual salvation. The Scalpsi, or white doves, as they called themselves, believed that by removing their sexual organs, they were purifying themselves and returning to the sinless state of Adam and Eve before the fall. Their practices were gruesome and extreme. Men underwent emasculation, while women faced mastectomies and other forms of genital mutilation. Selivanov's teachings were compelling enough to persuade many followers to endure these brutal procedures. They saw themselves as fulfilling the counsel of perfection found in Matthew 19, verse 12, where Jesus speaks of eunuchs who have made themselves so for the sake of the kingdom of heaven. The movement, shrouded in secrecy and reviled by outsiders, dwindled by the early 20th century. However, the legacy of the Scalpsi's extreme quest for purity through self-mutilation remains a haunting reminder of how spiritual beliefs can manifest in the most macabre and disturbing ways. Number 7. Human sacrifice by the Druids. The ancient Druids, an elite class among the Celts of pre-Roman and Roman Britain, have long intrigued historians and archaeologists with their mysterious and often horrifying practices. Acting as priests, teachers, and judges, these enigmatic figures are shrouded in mystery due to their lack of written records. The earliest known mentions of the Druids date back to the 3rd century BCE, with their name possibly derived from a Celtic word meaning knower of the oak tree. Our primary source of information on the Druids comes from Julius Caesar, who documented his encounters with the Celtic tribes in his work, The Gallic Wars. According to Caesar, the Druids were deeply involved in human sacrifice, a practice that was both a religious and superstitious ritual intended to appease the immortal gods.
And ye shall all die accursed!
The most infamous method of these sacrifices was the wicker man. Caesar described the wicker man as a colossal figure made of wood, filled with living men. This towering effigy would then be set ablaze, condemning those inside to a fiery death. This gruesome practice was believed to satisfy the gods, especially in times of severe disease, battle, or imminent danger. Strabo, another ancient writer, corroborated Caesar's account, adding that the wicker man would sometimes be filled with not only humans but also cattle and wild animals before being ignited. The authenticity and practicality of the wicker man as a tool for human sacrifice have been subjects of debate. Critics argue that such a structure would be structurally weak and potentially allow the victims to escape once set on fire. Some speculate that the victims might have been drugged to prevent escape, although Caesar and Strabo's writings do not specifically mention this. The chilling image of the wicker man has permeated popular culture, most notably through the 1973 British horror film, The Wicker Man. This film, set on the fictional Hebridean island of Summerisle, portrays a Christian police sergeant investigating a young girl's disappearance. In a shocking twist, the sergeant himself becomes a sacrificial victim inside a wicker man, reinforcing the terrifying legacy of this ancient practice. In contemporary times, the wicker man concept has found a place in neo-pagan practices during fire feasts and harvest celebrations. However, modern rituals ensure that no living beings, human or animal, are placed inside these structures, serving as a symbolic rather than literal continuation of the past. Number 6. Cannibalism in the Anasazi. In the remote landscapes of the American Southwest, the ancestral Puebloans, or Anasazi, left behind more than just their impressive cliff dwellings and pottery. Between 900 and 1300 CE, evidence suggests a darker side to their culture: cannibalism. While the idea that prehistoric Indians in the Southwest killed, butchered, and cooked their enemies isn't new, recent findings have provided chilling proof. An 850-year-old coprolite, a dried piece of human excrement, was discovered at a site in southwestern Colorado, specifically in the Four Corners area, where Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona, and Utah meet. This region has yielded strong evidence of cannibalism, including human bones that were disarticulated, cut, burned, and scattered in the same manner as animal bones used for food. In a small settlement of 3 half-buried pit houses, scientists uncovered the mutilated remains of 7 men, women, and adolescents in 2 of the houses. These victims appeared to have been massacred and butchered. The coprolite was found in a fire pit in the 3rd pit house. To determine if the butchered humans were consumed, a team led by biochemist Richard Marlar from the University of Colorado Health Sciences Center in Denver conducted a groundbreaking investigation. They looked for traces of myoglobin, an oxygen-transporting molecule found in skeletal and heart muscles but absent in the gut. Using an assay designed to distinguish between human myoglobin and that of 9 food animals like bison and rabbits, they made a startling discovery. The coprolite contained human myoglobin, but none was found in 25 control human fecal samples. Further tests revealed more human myoglobin on shards of a cooking pot. While some critics remain unconvinced, the evidence points to a gruesome practice among the Anasazi. As researchers continue to explore these ancient sites, they uncover not only the achievements, but also the dark secrets of the Anasazi civilization. Number 5. Sati practice in Hinduism. Sati, a heart-wrenching practice in ancient Hinduism, cast a long shadow over the lives of countless widows from the 4th century BCE to the 19th century CE. This ritual involved a widow sacrificing herself by sitting atop her deceased husband's funeral pyre, a dramatic act of loyalty and devotion that is both fascinating and horrifying. Primarily seen in North Indian Hindu communities, the practice of sati was intertwined with cultural and religious beliefs. While young children, especially baby girls, were typically buried, those older than 2 were customarily cremated. Rare European accounts provide chilling descriptions of sati, including the live burial of widows alongside their dead husbands. One haunting illustration from the 16th century Portuguese Códice Casanatense depicts such a live burial. Jean-Baptiste Tavernier, a 17th century French traveler and gem trader, recounted witnessing women being buried with their husbands along the Coromandel coast, while mourners danced during the cremation rites. Historical records of sati date back to ancient texts and accounts from foreign visitors. The lost works of Greek historian Aristobulus of Cassandreia, who traveled to India with Alexander the Great around 327 BCE, are preserved in fragments by Strabo. These writings suggest the practice was observed even then. Diodorus, another ancient historian, describes the wives of Cetius, an Indian captain, competing to immolate themselves after he died in the Battle of Parai-Takin in 317 BCE. Only the younger wife was permitted to join her husband in death on the pyre. Despite its tragic nature, sati was seen by some as an ultimate act of wifely devotion, believed to bring spiritual benefits to both the widow and her deceased husband. However, the practice faced increasing criticism and opposition over time. By the 19th century, British colonial authorities and Indian reformers campaigned against sati, leading to its eventual prohibition. Number 4. Scalp burying ritual. The Scythians, a fierce and nomadic group of ancient Iranian peoples, inhabited Central Asia and the Pontic-Caspian steppe in Eastern Europe from the 7th century BCE to the 3rd century CE. Known for their warrior prowess and unique cultural practices, the Scythians developed a rich culture of mythology, rituals, and beliefs that set them apart from other ancient civilizations. According to the Greek historian Herodotus, Scythian soldiers engaged in a ritual where they drank the blood of the first man they killed in combat, believed to imbue them with the strength and spirit of their fallen foe. Then they would behead their enemies and bring the severed heads to their king as proof of their participation in battle, ensuring they could claim their share of the spoils. This ritual was not merely a method of disposing of their enemies, but a deeply ingrained tradition symbolizing honor, respect, and bravery. The Scythians had a unique and horrific custom of using the scalps of their enemies as napkins, hanging them from the bridle reins of their horses as a sign of pride. The more scalps a warrior possessed, the greater his honor, respect, and admiration among his peers. They stitched together scalps to make cloaks and used flayed right arms to cover their quivers. Entire bodies were sometimes flayed and stretched across frames that they carried with them. These grisly artifacts served as constant reminders of their fearsome reputation and martial achievements. Another astonishing and equally terrifying practice involved human skulls. After cleaning out the skulls, the Scythians would cover them in leather, and the wealthy would line the inside with gold, transforming them into drinking cups. These skull cups were not just practical items, but symbols of bravery and valor. When important visitors arrived, these skull cups would be passed around, with their owners proudly recounting the tales behind each one. The scalp-burying ritual and related practices highlight the Scythians' unique approach to warfare and honor. These customs reinforced their social hierarchy, with the most decorated warriors earning the highest status and respect. The Scythians' fierce reputation and distinctive cultural practices have left an indelible mark on history, offering a fascinating glimpse into the lives of these ancient warriors. Number 3. Zoroastrian Tower of Silence. Imagine stepping back in time to ancient Persia, where the Zoroastrian faith thrived. Central to this religion, founded by Zarathustra or Zoroaster, was the eternal struggle between good and evil. followers dedicated their lives to serving Ahura Mazda, the god embodying goodness. Among the unique practices of Zoroastrianism was the use of the dakma, or Tower of Silence, for excarnation, the process of exposing bodies to natural elements and scavengers like vultures. A dakma is a large, circular structure where the dead are placed to be cleansed by nature. This practice, rooted in the belief that the body after death could pollute the earth and fire, allowed for a natural and respectful return to the environment. The term dakma itself emerged around the 10th century CE from the Middle Persian language, meaning place of the dead. Zoroastrianism, with its origins tracing back to as early as the 10th century BCE, became a formal religion in the 6th century BCE in Persia, present-day Iran. It spread widely during the Seleucid, Parthian, and Sassanid empires, reaching areas like modern Afghanistan, western China, and India. This faith was the dominant religion until the 7th century CE, when the Arab conquest introduced Islam to the region. The practice of excarnation was first mentioned by the ancient historian Herodotus. He described how animals would drag the body away before secret funeral rites were performed. This was followed by embalming the body in wax and placing it in a trench. Evidence suggests that protected desiccation and the use of ossuaries were practiced as early as the 5th century BCE. The earliest known towers of silence date back to the 9th century CE. These structures provided a dedicated space for the natural decomposition of bodies, a practice supported by religious texts and historical accounts from figures like Manushkir and Agathias. Texts such as Shayest ne Shayest, Rivayat, and Sadars further detail the Zoroastrian funeral practices. Even today, some Zoroastrian communities continue the tradition of using towers of silence, preserving a practice that connects them deeply with their ancient heritage. Number 2. Bull leaping. Picture a sport where young men and women perform daring acrobatic feats over the backs of running bulls. This is bull leaping, a thrilling and dangerous game that was an important part of the Minoan civilization, which flourished on the island of Crete over 3,500 years ago. Bull leaping wasn't just about jumping over bulls, it required immense skill and bravery. The first challenge was catching and taming the bulls, which was no small feat. These athletes, often dressed in elaborate outfits with rich jewelry, would face a galloping bull head-on. Scholars like J.C. Younger have studied bull leaping extensively, identifying 3 main techniques used by the athletes. One technique involved grabbing the bull by its horns, flipping over its head, landing on its back, and then performing another flip to the ground behind the bull. Another method had the athlete jump from a higher platform over the bull's head, land on their hands on the bull's back, and then flip backward to land on their feet behind the bull. A rare technique showed the athlete in a single pose above the bull's tail, possibly a stylized depiction rather than a real action. Bull leaping was more than just a sport. It had deep religious significance. The bull was a sacred animal to the Minoans, and bull leaping was likely performed during religious rites. These events may have been aimed at showcasing the best athletes, who were often seen as noblemen due to their ornate clothing and jewelry. The sport likely took place in special arenas near palaces, such as in Malaya, where specially prepared grounds have been found. These arenas were probably fenced to ensure the safety of both the spectators and the athletes. The origins of bull leaping may be traced back to Egypt, where a similar acrobatic technique called kibastema was practiced. This technique involved young men performing somersaults, sometimes amidst swords, showcasing incredible flexibility and daring. The excitement and danger of bull leaping are captured in Minoan art, particularly the famous frescoes from Knossos, dating back to the mid-15th century BC. These artworks vividly depict the various techniques and the bravery of the athletes, offering a glimpse into the thrilling world of Minoan bull leaping. Number 1. Temple of Artemis Animal Sacrifice. The Temple of Artemis was a sacred place where the ancient Greeks worshipped the goddess Artemis. This temple, located on the Greek island of Euboea, dates back to the classical period between the 5th and 4th centuries BCE. Archaeologists have been digging at this site for 4 years and have discovered amazing things about animal sacrifices and the temple's layout. The sanctuary, dedicated to Artemis, was a popular pilgrimage site. Artemis, a prominent figure in Greek mythology, is celebrated as the goddess of the hunt, wilderness, and wild animals. People would come for the Amoria festival procession, a significant religious event. The temple had an apsidal floor plan and was about 34 meters long, which is around 100 feet in the Greek metric system. Archaeologists found hearths or altars where animals were sacrificed to honor Artemis. These hearths were covered with layers of ash and calcined animal bones, evidence of the traditional animal sacrifice rituals. In these rituals, animals were led in a procession to the altar, where they were slaughtered and butchered. The inedible parts, such as internal organs and bones, were burned as offerings to the deity. During the excavations, researchers also uncovered a variety of offerings, including vases, weapons, jewelry, and a finely chiseled ivory head with Egyptian features. These artifacts show the cultural exchanges and influences in ancient times. The evidence of burning suggests that the temple suffered partial destruction by fire, but was later restored using mud brick walls. Eventually, the temple was completely demolished to make way for a new structure by the end of that century. In addition to the temple remains, archaeologists dug deep trial trenches and discovered a building dating back to the 9th or 8th century BCE. They also found bronze animal figurines and a terracotta bull's head from the late Bronze Age. These findings suggest that the site had ceremonial significance dating back to prehistoric times. The excavation is not limited to the temple itself, but extends to a thorough exploration of the Amarinthos region. This extensive survey seeks to uncover how the sanctuary was woven into the ancient landscape. Researchers are examining the natural environment, distribution of settlements, agricultural zones, cemeteries, quarries, and communication networks, including a sacred way that once connected the sanctuary to the ancient city of Eretria. Which of these religious rites do you find most horrifying? Let us know your opinion in the comments below.